So welcome everybody. This is the SharePoint Patterns and Practices or Office 365 Developer Patterns and Practices Office Hours, and this is the August 10th edition. And essentially, what the Office Hours is all about is we want to make sure that people in the community side have an opportunity to ask us questions from the PnP side and also from a SharePoint engineering perspective. Now that the SharePoint PnP or Office.PnP is owned by SharePoint Engineering, people can then ask directly questions around the direction, and if we can talk about certain things, we openly want to talk about them. For example, the timing of the SharePoint framework release is something which we cannot disclose right now. It's going to happen soon. Patience on that one. PnP itself, we provide code samples, guidance documentations, monthly community calls. Case studies are also out there for Blue Meteor and Volvo cars. SharePoint framework stuff is still pending for SharePoint framework to get to the preview mode, which will happen soon. And then there's a lot of guidance on the SharePoint add-ins and Graph and general Office 365 development. Now, in these office hours, we have few standard slides, which we always go through, just making sure what is an office hours and special interest groups, because there's always some new people attending on this. And I do know that we're repeating the same story all over again every single, bi-weekly within this, for those who've been in the office hours in the past. But anyway, let's actually, I'm going to click there. So the PnP office hours is really bi-weekly course for open discussion on different areas. Every now and then we want to cover something which is coming in SharePoint or in Office 365 development, or we want to get your input on something. And then we also want to tell what's coming up within the PnP, because the monthly community calls usually run short. We want to have this additional time for typically slightly smaller group of people to have an open discussion as well. We also have the special interest group for JavaScript development led by Patrick Rogers, who's on the call as well. Good that he has time on top of all of the work in the Sandbox Solutions side, because I know that Patrick is so happy with that stuff. But every single week there is a special interest group for JavaScript, which is also producing this JavaScript core framework, how would I put it, which is actually fully aligned already with the development model, what we will do with SharePoint framework as well. So using web stack, using the same technologies, using Gulp and all of that. And that framework or the client-side core component will be completely usable by the SharePoint framework client-side web parts as well, to get access on a data, as an example, from a SharePoint list. Moving on things, options I do have to help the PnP, quite classic slide as well. You can absolutely contribute your samples, use our samples, core component and guidance. You can provide feedback using Yammer. We'll probably update that pretty soon to be network@office.com, because the Yammer, the open Office 365 network in Yammer is going to be shut down on 1st of September. Which is a weird decision, but the advantage is that the network.office.com is anonymously accessible, and Google and other search engines like Bing is indexing that properly. The stuff in Yammer isn't. So the whole point is that people can find then the answers and questions more easily. You can absolutely extend or improve existing samples and fix issues what you encounter, or submit issue list stuff, or pull requests to the GitHub repos. Now, there will be a lot of changes coming up quite soon related on the repo structure. We will keep the existing PnP repo, we will keep some of the existing PnP stuff, but there will be new repos in a SharePoint organization. So there's already, you can actually see that the SharePoint organization is set up in a GitHub. So if you go github.com/SharePoint, you can see that there's a organization. There isn't any visible repos yet, but they will be coming up there pretty soon. Whenever we will release the first stuff around the new development models. Now, a few things what I wanted to kind of cover first before we open up the forum for open discussion, and feel free to ask questions in the window or interrupt me with audio as well if there's needed. One of the hot topics pretty recently is the Sandbox Solution changes in SharePoint Online. So we already disabled the activation of Sandbox Solutions in a SharePoint Online, and the existing solutions which have code behind will work at least for 30 days was the original communication. You can get an extension for that for additional 90 days using the standard support channels. But this is really the time for those who haven't done the transformation yet to the adding model or remote APIs to do that. It's slightly awkward that the SharePoint framework isn't quite yet available, but even though it would be in preview, it would be only in a preview mode. So not necessarily the right time to convert your in production stuff to the SharePoint framework in the first week when that stuff is available either. So the GA, the global availability for SharePoint framework initial stuff will be probably, well, I'm not going to speculate that. Well, there will be probably public communications on the global availability of SharePoint framework by the time of Ignite, no doubt. What we've done right now from a PnP side, we provided some high-level guidance on the Sandbox Solution transformation. So how do you actually get rid of those assemblies within the Sandbox Solution? Because that's really the key. If the Sandbox Solution contains an assembly, it doesn't really matter if it actually has code or not. It cannot be no longer activated within a SharePoint Online. And there's the awkward small situation where the Visual Studio by default compiles and an assembly inside of Sandbox Solution, even though you would only have declarative definitions in the solution. Now, that link is available in the PnP MSDN, and then additional stuff what we have provided is a script which is available from the PNP Tools to do an inventory on the Sandbox Solutions within a SharePoint Online tenant. We will be releasing additional guidance, few additional pages, I think 4 additional pages tomorrow or by end of this week. That's really the target. And those are more specifically on the what if you have an event receiver, what if you have a web part, what if you have certain thing, what would be your options in the new build. There's also a nice free tool from Rencor. So Rencor guys, do we have anybody in the call? We do have Irvin at least in the call. Develop this additional free tool which can be used actually to check the Sandbox Solutions from a tenant as well. It has some additional capabilities. It's presenting the information in a much more nicer way. It also has an option to clear or remove by the default assembly inside of the Sandbox Solution automatically, which is a nice add-on, which we don't provide as a PnP or as a product resolution right now. We can open up, if there's any questions around this one, we can have a questions around slightly later after that we've gone through the slides. Well, a few more slides to go through. So what I wanted to quickly, thank you Jonathan for sharing that. What I wanted to quickly do is quickly show how the script actually works. And let me share my screen and show you this one in practice. So we get that one also recorded. I just need to clean up some of my screens. It's been a pretty busy day again. There we go, that goes away. Let's put that one there and I can start sharing my screen. One of the screens. There we go. And let's actually show you where you can find all of these resources as well. I'm gonna jump on the right. Come on. Well, it doesn't really matter. So if I go to the github.com/officedev, and in here PNP Tools. So in the PNP Tools, we are having small set of scripts and additional solutions, which are not really samples, or they're add-on capabilities. For example, the scripts are there to give you a list of principles, give you a list of additional stuff, which might be useful within the production usage as well. One of the scripts here is the SharePoint Sandbox Solution list solutions from tenant. And this contains a README, which is explaining what the solution is actually doing. And then it contains the actual script itself. So what I have here is that I have the script actually opened and quickly just showing how it works. So I'm going to move into my location. There we go, there's my solution. So what I'm going to do is quickly create a credential object. It's just the easiest way to actually consume the script for multiple different times. So I'm going to do create credentials and executing that, and then I'm going to sign in or providing my credentials against my personal tenant. Try to write the password properly. There we go. And Bert, let's get back on that note in a second. I know what you're going to say. And then I'm going to actually execute the script. So I'm going to do an admin URL. In this case, let's connect to my admin URL. I'm using my tenant administrative account. And then I'm going to paste in the credentials there. And what's going to happen is that the script starts executing. It connects to my SharePoint Online using the credentials what I gave against that site or admin site, and then it starts scanning those individual site collections, going through them, and it also lists the Sandbox solution what it finds directly in the console window, but also in the CSV file, which is then located inside of the folder. While that's doing that, I'm going to actually open up that folder. So I can show you what it actually is producing. So Rinko's tool is slightly more, how would I put it, slightly more fine-tuned. This is only for getting the information. The one thing what we added here quite recently is the solution hash, because even though the solution name might be the same, like the foobar.wsb, the content of that solution might be different, or it might be a different version. And so the hash is there to actually identify that the solution is exactly the same. It provides this list of CSV, or this is a CSV file, which is actually an output. And it also gets the additional information about the Sandbox solution. So it's getting the site URL, WSB name, author, created date, is it activated or not, has assemblies or not, which is really the key what we're looking for, and then the final topic is the solution has. So for example, in this particular case, I'm going to actually zoom in. We can see that the foobar.wsb package is there and there, but the name itself is not actually unique, but looking into the hash, we can say that that's exactly the same solution. So we know that it's precisely the same solution, and we can fix one of them, and we don't have to worry about the other ones. Theoretically, the name could be the same, but hash is different. That means that it's a slightly different solution. And now, as an output, I also got a CSV file, which I can then open in Excel. So I can actually start analyzing and splitting these to a columns. So text to column, delimiter, we're looking into the comma and finish, and voila, and we can actually filter that even further. And now we have a nice set of Excel file, which we can then use to filter down only those which have assemblies. And voila, those are the ones which I need to tackle within my Office 365 tenant. And from them, we can quickly see that there's no duplicate. Oh, there is actually even a duplicate. So there's SharePoint Project 1 and the hash is exactly the same, so that's a duplicate. But those are not activated, so therefore I don't need to worry about them. So in my case, the only things what I need to worry about are these two. No idea what they are. They're leftovers from 2014. Interesting. Cool. That's pretty much the summary around the script itself. Script itself is nothing that it's doing its stuff in one thread. It's not multi-thread supported. But it scans through all of the site collections within a tenant. So that might take a while if the tenant has a lot of site collections, but we can absolutely wait for things to finalize. Cool. Let's get back on this on the slides. One thing what Bert was probably about to say. Bert, you can say that now.
Can I say it now? Yeah, but you're reading my mind exactly the moment I clicked on the button to say something. So you saw Vesta entering some credentials, and it all magically worked. And it's important in this case that the credentials that you use have permission to, first of all, to tenant admin. So it needs to be a SharePoint admin credentials. I think that's pretty obvious, and it's also documented in the script. But the second thing is that there isn't a guarantee that that particular user also can access all of your site collections. So if you see access denied showing up during the run, it means that particular sites are not accessible by that account. So you can either use tenant admin to grant that account temporary access to those site collections and run the script again to get a full picture, or use alternative techniques like app only with tenant scope permissions to kind of roll your own. We might improve the script over time, but today I think the easiest solution for you is to temporarily grant the particular user permissions to the site collections.
Thanks, Bert. And then moving on things, because we want to have that open discussion as well, if there's any questions. One thing what we wanted to quickly show you guys as well is something what we've been working on. Paolo is not on the call right now because Paolo is on vacation. This is really Paolo's baby, because we want, well, this relates on the PnP Partner Pack, which was originally created by Paolo and Irvin, and now Paolo has been evolving that to the version 2.0. And one of the things what we're planning to actually release is a remote template gallery. This is already up and running. We're working on finalizing the UIs, finalizing the logistics, and creating some sample templates. And you might, I said it yesterday as well, but you might kind of compare this to the classic Fabulous 40. So what it means is that the community can actually share their remote provisioning templates in a GitHub. So you will submit a pull request in a GitHub in a certain folder structure, and when it's actually approved, it will be visible within the open gallery where people can go and download these templates to be used within their SharePoint deployment. This is planned to get ready by end of August. We'll see how we get the timing done. And what I wanted to quickly, I just wanted to show you this one quickly in practice as well, so we get it also recorded for those who are interested. So let me share my screen one more time. If you are interested, this is well, there isn't that many super functionalities within the UI perspective. I'm going to paste in the URL there as well. It's already available to be played with. Right now it's filled with sample data, so it's template 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But the whole idea is that we will have a gallery where people can go and they can filter down, for example, based on I want to have a business layout and which is working in SharePoint 2013, targeted for SharePoint 2013, and the rating is high, or the rating is low. And I can easily then go, oh, we did have a 1 rating here. There we go, template 92. And then I can go and have a look on the additional details on the template. And then if I want, I can simply download this template to be available within my environment and within my deployment. And this is really because a lot of the templates what people are using are precisely the same. So this way people can actually easily share the basic templates for others to use as well. And one thing kind of I mentioned on this one, obviously some of these templates might have, let's say, a custom branding, they might have additional branding elements within them. If you use the PnP provisioning engine, you can always reapply the branding on top of these templates as well. And what I mean with that one is that even though there would be a template which is using super funky theming or custom master, well, not necessarily custom master, but it's custom CSS definition, you can actually apply two templates to your SharePoint deployment. The first one is the one from the gallery, and the second one is your personalized branding. And voila, you have a theme site with those customizations, whatever the template is containing, with the branding which is consistent within your deployment. So kind of an easy, interesting, well, I would actually say this is interesting to see if the community is highly interested on this. The engine usage is, however, growing really fast. So we have a confirmed usage of CSM core component already in more than 2,000 tenants. And we know that majority of that usage is actually on the PnP provisioning templates. Sooner or later, SharePoint Engineering will start releasing additional, let's say, templating capabilities, native out-of-the-box capabilities within a SharePoint, but those are pretty far away still. So the PnP remote provisioning template model is still the model for, well, I wouldn't want to guess on timing, but it will still take for quite a long time before the out-of-the-box new templating models will be at the same level as what we have from the PnP remote provisioning template. And if you start using the remote provisioning templates from PnP, we will absolutely give you then the guidance on how to transform from the PnP templates to the native SharePoint new template model, which is coming at some point. What we're looking into doing within the SharePoint Engineering is actually aligning on the model what the PnP has been using, which is essentially getting rid of the feature framework, thinking this as a remote API operation, and applying the settings. There has been even discussions that should we natively support the PnP provisioning schema within the SharePoint, which, by the way, would be super cool because the provisioning schema has been built together with the community. And it's already defining pretty much all of the settings what we can do within SharePoint. And there's a good comment from Bill Ayers, so let's hope the engineering team goes into the same directions as PnP. Funny enough, the team who is responsible of this customization in the end is the representative is within this call. So, and that would be me. So my team, the team what I'm working on, where I'm actually working in the Redmond organization, is responsible of all of the APIs within SharePoint, including Sandbox Solution APIs and SharePoint server-side APIs and CSM APIs and all of the new stuff. The team isn't massively big, but we will absolutely look into doing and aligning the future models in the PnP stuff, which is good. So we have a good connection between the PnP and the engineering teams. Are you the team? No, I'm not. No, there's a slightly
Sorry.
Good question, Roddy. So to be fair, the kind of a slightly clarifying that it's people don't quite know how the organizations work. So the product managers who are responsible of the APIs are in the same team as me. For example, Jax and Luca, and if you know the names of these old school SharePoint people, and Dan Kogan. Then we have engineers who are actually implementing stuff based on the specifications what we do. They're in a different organization, which might be weird and sound strange, but that gives us a flexibility from an engineering perspective. So our team is responsible of defining what will be done. The actual implementation will be done by different people, but then we're the people who will sign off the implementation. Cool. Then I've been talking again 25 minutes. Damn it. Bert, take it over.
Yes, thank you, Vesa. So, as you saw in the previous slides, the provisioning engine is getting more and more important. We get, since we have more functionality relying on it with the partner pack AV2. Now, what we've noticed in the past, and which is something that you clearly said to us, is that we had sometimes a bug, maybe quite a few bugs, and given that the scope of the engine kept on growing, we saw more and more bugs, small things popping up, and which meant that we had to do additional emergency releases afterwards to kind of compensate. Now, with this, as of the August release, we included a whole set of new test cases for the engine. And the goal is to cover all aspects of the provisioning engine in very detailed test cases. And I will show you what that means in a few minutes. Our coverage today is kind of, let's say, 60%, 70% more or less, covering the most important objects, so like fields, content types, lists, etc. The ones which we do not have today, it's on the second bullet, is site security files, pages, page content, publishing and workflow, and navigation. Those are coming up pretty soon. Hope to have them completed by the September timeframe. But let's have a quick peek at what it actually means, those test cases, and how also you can play a role in those as well. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. So I've opened up a
Did we lost Bert, or is this on my side?
Yeah, I don't hear him as well.
Okay, so I can see a black screen being shared, and Bert is reconnecting.
Hello guys.
Hello.
Apologies for that. Skype died at the most convenient moment.
Yeah.
Should I say this aloud? No, but yeah, it happened again. So let's try again. I was sharing my screen and then it went wrong. So fingers crossed. It started installing the Bliss Antons. No, it didn't. But, so can you see the screen?
Yep, all good on my side at least.
All right, cool. So this is the Office Dev PnP Core project, and we have a core test project for the people that are familiar with testing. And in here we have a folder framework and a folder functional. So the functional folder, that's the new thing. So all the new engine test cases are in this particular functional folder. The other test cases are still relevant. We have a lot of test cases for connectors, for example. But what we wanted to do with the functional test cases is really test the actual engine functionalities, like you would use it in your day-to-day engine work. Now let's have a peek at, let's take an example. I think it's the easiest way to show it. Let's take list tests. And let's scroll down to a test case. Let's zoom in. So here we have a test case that's testing the list functionality in the engine. And all of the test cases that are added are kind of in a similar structure. Initially we try to, then the test case will create lists, like doing the initial provisioning. Sorry, I was slightly wrong. So this is the initial provisioning, the second box. The first box is uploading supporting data. So in this case, we uploaded a few files since we need them later on when we do the list test. So here we are testing list add functionality by applying a particular template and then validating that the template was applied correctly. We're also testing where possible delta handling. So you know that the engine does support delta changes for some of the objects. Not everything is possible with delta handling, but quite a lot. And that's then covered in a second test. Let's have a look at the actual test XML file. So let's go over here in the templates folder. You see all the XML files, so the engine templates and the resources that are used, which by the way is a very good resource if you want to do something special with the engine, which you haven't done before. Everything should be in here. All possible implementation samples should be in here, and we will add more over time if there's something missing. So let's go to the list add. Scrolling down. What you see is a provisioning template here with list instances. But in this case, it's not just one list instance. We added all possible. We added list instances to cover all possible attributes and all possible elements inside. So this is a very basic one, the top one. This is a bit more complex with more property sets. We have one with content type bindings. We have one with field refs, with all the field ref properties set, with folders, with security on folders. What else? With just fields. I can keep scrolling down with custom views, security at list level. Well, you name it, it's there. So all the aspects of the engine are covered in this particular list test case. If you look at the list delta case, you'll see that it will list all the properties for which we have delta handling, which can be changed by the engine if the list exists. And then you see the same test cases again. So we're going to just simply try to make a change using the engine and then validate that the change actually happened. If you see, sometimes you see a 1605 behind in the names, which means that this is a particular file to test functionality added with the latest schema, which in this case is 2016-05 version. So the default test cases are using the 2015 December, 2015-12 schema. But for example, we recently added custom actions at list level in the 2016 May schema, and for that we have also like a test case. How to create a list instance with custom actions? It's covered in here. So it's work in progress, but we cover a lot of objects already in as much detail as possible. Let's take, for example, term groups. So you see all the term group options covered. And this will definitely help improve quality. We already fixed several minor bugs while doing this work. I've not yet gone over the issue list, so the next step is going over the issue list and kind of close issues or provide feedback on issues. Because a lot of I think a lot of smaller logged problems already are covered by these test cases since we fixed several things. Now, how can you help with this? One thing that would be cool to have is more, let's call it combined test cases. Like I think that the lookup fields is a typical one. So we have a lookup field in the test case. So if you go to fields, where is my field? Field add. I should have, if this taxonomy fields, taxonomy, lookup fields. So we have some lookup fields in the test case, and they're validated and they work. But we don't have like a real kind of a business case where we have like a list in the root web, then you have a sub-web, and in the sub-web you have a list grabbing data from the root web field. Just saying something. So if someone wants to kind of help, it would be kind of cool to make additional test cases that cover those scenarios. So making those XMLs kind of in a similar way than I did. Use the test framework which you have here. So there's a base class for the test. So all of the plumbing is done for you in this functional test class. So it's not that much plumbing that you have to write. It's just focusing on this part, on the actual XML, and then the validation of the XML. So if there's interest or willingness, this would be an area where we can use some help.
An ideal way of reporting a bug is to actually create a test that fails because of the bug.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, it would be good if we fix something, or especially if it's a more complex scenario. Actually, any scenario, any bug that we fix in the engine, we should cross-check, like, okay, do we have this particular attribute or element that was missing or that went wrong? Is it covered in the test cases? And it should work in a test case if it's fixed as well. So, yeah, good point, Bill. If you do that in a consistent manner, it will allow us in the future to keep the engine stable and to also do refactoring at the code level, for example, make things slightly better without risking that we break the engine somewhere, because it gets more and more complex and bigger, so we really need this test framework.
Yeah, regression tests, as Nigel says. Bert, can you, just out of interest, can you run these tests? Are you set up to do that now? Can we see them running?
Actually, I will show you something really different.
Cool. See that.
Well, this test running is not really exciting, but I want to show you actually is this a way for you to see how we ran the test cases. So let's move on over here. It's actually my second slide, but I'll just do the demo first, and then we can talk about the slide. So scrolling up, here we have a new tool, SharePoint PnP Test Automation, which is a basic, simple website for now, but it gives you insight in our test runs. So a bit of background, all the PnP test cases are run on a nightly basis across a set of validation rings, as we call it, which essentially means that we try to run the PnP bits on as early as possible environments. So we have what we call an eDoc environment, which is a Microsoft internal-only environment, which contains like the most recent bits. So if a developer does a check-in of code, within a few days it ends up on that eDoc environment, which means that if our test case fails over there, we can catch issues before they even get further. And that's kind of the whole point of test automation, is to catch those issues early on. There's then additional environments like a canary environment. Then we have the regular empty first release environment, but we also test in SharePoint 2013, SharePoint 2016. So all these environments are being tested each night. But this site gives you an insight on, okay, how did the test go? What went wrong? Which might be good for you because you want to understand, like, okay, I created a test case and I think it was good. I submitted the code, it was accepted, but did the test case really work? Is there some issue with the test case? Yes or no? Here we can see.
One note quickly, Bert, on that one, just to clarify for the other ones. We're looking into having that configuration title to be understandable. Now, Bert MD first release app only. Well, you can kind of get it, but...
Yeah, that's just the environment name of the configuration of the test lab, that's being issued. It should be changed to just first release. Yeah, you're right. But the other ones make sense, I think. Well, anyhow, if you doubt what it is, you can just click on one of those guys. So let's take this Bert empty first release credentials. When I click on it, you get a description. Testing empty first release tenant using credentials. So all tests are run using credentials and app only to cover both scenarios. You see some of the URLs being used over here. Let's go back. So you see on the dashboard the most recent test cases. You see the number of tests being run, the ones passed, skipped, failed, and the log. So if you click on the total number of test cases, so this column, what you see is like a test case evolution. So this particular test run against the empty first release is pretty stable. You see that we don't have many errors. Generally, it's no errors. So here we have 2 errors, for example. And the blips here, of the drops here, is typically when the test case didn't run at all. Some infrastructure at my side, whether somehow the test cases were not run, or we had a compilation issue. If stuff is not compiling, there's no test cases being run either.
Very important point, Bert. Past should be green, not blue.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good point. Yeah. Thanks.
I think
super
it's
important.
Yeah, yes. I get the important stuff, yeah.
Well, it's good that's good for input anyway. So it's a management level absolutely. Input, no doubt, Bill.
Good feedback.
Oh, but I'm not joking about it, Bill. This is just beta. It's the first. This UI isn't the final one. We still have some revisions coming up. So if you guys experiment and see some things to improve, just let us know. We're open for suggestions. We will also open source the UI, the source code of this site. So any suggestion, improvements, bugs you find, please let us know. I'm going to go back over here to the home page. Typically, when you look at this, you're interested in knowing, okay, what went wrong? And you see over here that there is a lot of failures, and this is also an infrastructure problem, but I'm going to scroll slightly down, for example, to this guy. SharePoint 116 test with app only. There's 2 fields, so I'm going to click on this one. And then you scroll, you navigate to a page showing the failed test cases. You can still search for your test case if there are many fields in the filter. But let's have a look at this particular test case, web localization test. Then you see the actual output of the test case. So same thing that you will see in Visual Studio. Plus on top you have the console output as well. So all the information is gathered for you in this result, which allows you to have a look at why things failed. I would think what's the benefit for you guys out of this is understanding if your test cases indeed work. Gives you a view on what things break, where we might need some help. So, and it also gives you some kind of an insurance, like, okay, I'm depending on PNP. I have my product that uses PNP. It gives you a view on how stable PNP is, if there are issues, so that you need to be aware of. Now, you don't have to necessarily always go back to the site and have a look at it. Is PNP still running fine? Aren't there any regressions showing up, etc.? So if you're just interested in knowing what happens, you can go to settings. And if I go to settings, you will be asked to sign in. I'll explain you why in a minute, but you can sign into this application using any Azure AD credential. And it's not asking, it's just asking the basic permissions from any Azure AD credential. So if you have an empty tenant, you have a user, you can use that user. So I'm going to go to settings, which will trigger the sign in. I'm going to sign in with my empty credentials. And then I'm in a settings page. And the reason why I need to sign in for settings page is because it allows, in user settings, we allow you to request a mail, a daily test summary mail. And of course, we only can do that if we know who you are. So if you're interested in doing that, you can go to settings and subscribe to the mail. You will get like a typical subscription flow where we ask you to confirm your email address after you entered the email address. But once that's done, you should get a daily mail with the test results, kind of showing you this table plus a detail of all the failed test cases inside the mail. So you don't necessarily have to go to the site.
And just to be clear, if somebody is taking screenshots, right now this is actually showing some additional data already, because you're an administrator.
Yes, yeah, good point. So you can see this. So when you go to this, you will see your community member. There is a core member team role to show more data and an admin role to configure like security settings like client ID, client secrets, for example, can be configured using the site. But that's then for administrator only. You guys will only see publicly accessible environments. But now since I logged on, additional environments visible, so edoc, ddoc. So these are internal validation rings, as I mentioned before. We cannot really expose those test results to all of you due to legal and compliance reasons. So your experience will be actually seeing this. So you not see edoc and ddoc, but you see all the publicly available environments and the test results for those, which I think is definitely an asset.
And kind of a small additional story on that one. So obviously internally from the engineering side, well, we are reporting these to the right people if we're seeing any issues within the edoc or ddoc or in the early validation strings. And the target is that you shouldn't see any things getting failed because of platform level issues. So we're getting all of this integrated in the actual SharePoint Online service checkups as well. Because we're kind of nicely, the PnP engine, the provisioning engine can be used nicely to validate API level changes.
Yep, and it's not just provisioning engine test cases that are run. So all test cases we have are running. So you see like we have 340 test cases being executed, 349 actually here. So yeah, so a lot of test cases being run on a daily basis. And actually, just to confirm Vesta's comment, we have about 10 bugs which we found using test automation already before. So stuff that was shipped to edoc and to move to production, which we found errors due to our test automation. So it really shows that this is working well, and it's kind of a safety net for you guys since we try to ensure that PnP is always working and stable, even with the regular change rhythm that we have nowadays. Future, what will happen in the future? I think we will, as mentioned, we'll add more engine test cases. We're also looking into adding a UI automation using Selenium. So Selenium is an open source UI automation, test automation framework. So the idea is to add testing of core applications, core add-ins. So also test from UI perspective that things keep working. Yeah, I think that kind of sums it up. Any feedback is just welcome. If you want to help and join this effort, please let us know.
Yeah, I have a question, Bert, actually.
Sure.
So are those, I noticed some of the duration of the test runs are several hours. Is that because they've been paused or something? Or are those the actual duration of the test run?
These are actual durations of test runs. And the main reason why it takes time is because there are quite a lot of test cases that do create new site collections for each run. Like the engine test cases, if I do list testing, I create new site collection, do the list testing, then drop the site collection, then I create again.
Right, and are you doing that for every test?
Not for every test, because that would take us ages, but...
well, it is taking ages.
It is taking ages, yes. But let's say that I have some Azure resources, so I can just spin up additional machines.
Yeah.
Today is running on 2 machines, and I'm about more or less now need to kind of add a few more machines to divide the load.
Okay, so these suites of tests could all run in parallel, couldn't they, potentially?
Yes.
So
they actually run in parallel during the night.
I was just a little worried that if it's a 2-day test cycle now, then in a year's time it's going to be a week or something.
No, that's not.
Yeah,
not
but you only need to do. Yeah, it's a time of a single configuration, isn't it, that we need to worry about?
Yes, each configuration can run in parallel. We can have we have about 9 configurations today. They can all run in parallel. So as long as they can finish in 24 hours, we should be fine.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, good. Wonderful.
Nigel's question: how can we help? Nigel, one thing that I'm really interested in is getting a test case, because I know you're very interested in lookup fields. If you can have a test case that either shows that it works, or if it doesn't work, shows it doesn't work, then we can add it in, and then we can also work on the engine to get this discovered. And if we have it working once and the test case is good, then if we do something that breaks the lookup fields, the test will fail, and we will know up front. So we can then quickly change things before we push out updates. So that's what I meant in the beginning. Like, if there are bugs, have a look at the test cases, and if needed, just add additional test cases to cover your bugs, and then it makes it easy for us to also validate that your bug is correctly fixed and completely fixed. And all of this is also running in on-prem as well as online. So I know that you're also focused on the on-prem side of the house. So each test case that you add will automatically be run against the latest SharePoint 2013 and SharePoint 2016 environments. Now, if you create templates, try to create them in the kind of similar manner and structure than we have today. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory when you look at the templates and at the code. But yeah, it would be cool if you can do that. And Patrick, good point. Something as well on the radar is include the JS Core test cases as well. Yeah, definitely. All right. We talked again quite a lot.
Yes, we did.
Still have 10 minutes for Q&A.
Any questions around anything what we covered today? We're going to absolutely save some time in the end as well, but if somebody wants to do a rant around the Sandbox solution closing, that's fine as well.
I have a question about the Sandbox solution stuff.
Yep.
Is there going to be an issue with like the site templates? Is there a problem there with this deprecation?
So no. So only what's impacted is Sandbox solutions with code behind. So if the Sandbox solution has a assembly in it, then it will be impacted. Now, you can have site templates or custom web templates which have an assembly or they don't have an assembly. So if the template is created in Visual Studio, it might have an assembly. If it's created using the UI, using the save site as a template capability, then it won't have an assembly in it. So all of that stuff will be still working. So you can still use WSP packages for deploying assets, even though we do recommend people not to do that and moving into the more modern capabilities.
Okay. I ran the script that you demoed on a nonprofit site that I'm working with, and it reported 400 some sites, and I thought I was going to have to change my pants, man. Like, oh boy.
Yes.
But none of them have assemblies, so it's okay.
Yes. Yes, and that's really the reason for that additional information within the script as well, that it's pointing out which of them have assembly. So,
yeah,
good.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, comments, rants?
I had one. Unfortunately, Paolo's on holiday, but he created a PowerShell script under Solutions called Enable SP Responsive.
Yep.
UI, I think.
Oh, you.
And it's
Yep.
And it's a PowerShell script, and that was earlier in the year. And then in the meantime, Erwin has created, I think it's Erwin, an Enable SPO responsive UI commandlet.
Yep.
Which kind of slightly overtakes. So the script that Paolo wrote was it kind of provisions a template with the UI files in. They both use the same assets.
Yep, correct.
But Paolo's provisions the template, and then there's something that injects some JavaScript.
Sure.
I didn't quite get to the bottom of how it worked. Whereas Erwin uses the the core library to implement it. So.
Sure.
I think it was the other thing was there was an issue that I found as well, that it didn't work on a SharePoint Online site. It only worked on-prem. So I was suggesting that we should maybe modify that script solution so that it just used the commandlet because I think there's potentially a bit of confusion for people as well. This is something that's come up because I'm sort of very interested in responsive sites.
Yeah.
So I was going to suggest making some changes to or submit a pull request for Paolo's solution that would just use the commandlet and optionally upload some different assets if you wanted to customize, have your own version of the UI. But I don't really have time, unfortunately, to sort of set up lots of different environments for testing it on in different scenarios. Is it acceptable, I mean, just as a general point, to submit a pull request even if you haven't sort of exhaustively tested it? With that, or is that something that we shouldn't do? What's the thinking in the group?
So we do have, Irvin, let's go steps one by one. So first of all, the responsive thing. So the initial implementation we released back in February, and that was indeed implemented by Paolo or Paolo's company. And then back when we were in Zagreb, me, Irvin, and Paolo, Irvin had a boring moment in the booth, Rencore booth, and he actually implemented the native support to this PnP core component that's responsive assets to be deployed. And I think it's actually, Irvin can confirm, but it's implemented in a way that the CSS and assets are inside of as resources inside of the assembly, because they're pretty small.
That's correct. Yeah.
So it's kind of an evolution, but we never actually updated the script, the original script in the PNP tools. And no doubt, probably we should clarify the situation so that it's more understandable how to do that. Both are working exactly the same, and they should be aligned.
They're not, though. I don't think they are. I don't think it's. I don't think the script is working on SharePoint Online, and there's an outstanding issue that somebody else filed actually around that. But the commandlet does work, and in fact, you can run the script and then later run the commandlet, and it fixes it.
Okay.
So I think it would make sense at this point to not use the script method at all and use the commandlet now that the commandlet is available. Given that Erwin was at a loose end in Zagreb.
Yes. So, but to be fair, there's two ends on that story. So if we move the full PowerShell commandlet execution, yes, it's super clean, it's super easy, but it hides everything. So the abstraction is increased to a level where nobody knows what's actually happening. Which might not be
I don't want to know. I don't want it. Yeah, but I don't want to know what's happening. I just want it to work.
Okay, fair point.
So, but the script can upload different assets. So the assets are actually the same, but you could modify the assets and upload those instead. So there's nothing stopping you having the script upload the assets, and then the commandlet. And Evan, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, the commandlet will detect that the assets are already in the whichever library it is and not overwrite them. But if they're missing, the commandlet overwrites. So you can have your cake and eat it, really, using the script.
True. Anyway, I think there is that long discussion with you, Paolo, and the third guy in the PNP Tools issue list. I think it has like 35 comments, and I participated on that like a month ago for a few comments as well.
Yeah.
So let's follow up on that one. We need to get to a conclusion and make sure that the things are working properly against SharePoint on premises and SharePoint Online. So that's a fair feedback. I think Paolo will be back from vacation relatively soon. Is it already next week?
I think next week.
Yeah. So
okay. Well, maybe I can try and get a pull request in before he gets back, so that he's got something to do, isn't it?
Exactly. Nothing else to do at this moment.
Exactly. Well, back from holiday.
Yeah.
Nothing in the inbox, probably.
No. Never. Cool. But yeah, let's let's close on that loop and conclusion. And Bill, if you feel free to submit a pull request. So looking into what people are submitting in the GitHub, sure, it would be great that stuff would be tested across multiple environments, but it's not reality. Not that many people have access on multiple different environments. And I think we actually have a test case, at least in the queue, or planned a test case for the responsive stuff as well. So we can do the testing then that it's working when the stuff is checked in.
Awesome.
Good. Anything else? Oh, we are hitting the timing. Dun, 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 dun. Well, that probably means that we should be closing. I think next time, within 2 weeks, we probably won't have as much to talk about in the start. We'll make sure that there's plenty of time for random discussions as well. And I know that for the time being, it's pretty confusing that Yammer is shutting down, and then we're asking people to go to the network.office.com, even though nothing is happening there. But that's well, we just need, it would be good to move the discussions to the network.office.com so we get things collected on that side. I can still say that the Yammer is super active, and nothing happens on any of the other channels. It's a interesting decision. I don't know why. But cool, I think that's it for this time. Thank you everybody for joining, and let's keep on doing what we're doing. So please use the Yammer, please use the groups, use the issue list, use the GitHub, use the stuff what we're providing, and give us feedback so we know that we're doing good job or not. But thank you, and see you guys next time.
Yep, see you guys next time. Bye-bye.